So good morning, everyone. We start the new year with a new book. The book is Action and Reaction of the Andre Luiz collection, Life in the Spiritual World. This book comes after Between Heaven and Earth, and we are going to read one chapter per month. There's only 20 chapters in this book, but they are longer than the previous book. Today we're going to read the introduction, and we'll try to finish chapter 1. If we can't, we'll continue next month, because chapter 1 has a lot of information, a lot of things for us to learn and to discuss. But this book was written in 1957, which is 100 years after the publication of the Spirit's book. So Emmanuel on the introduction, all these books by Andre Luiz, Life in the Spiritual World, have the introduction of Emmanuel, the spiritual guide of Xavier, okay? So Zoraida, can you read for us the introduction?
Yes, absolutely. The 100th anniversary. Under the aegis of God's Christ, on April 18, 1957, the Kardashian codification will celebrate its first 100 years of invaluable service to earthly humankind. 1 century of work, renewal, light. Andre Luiz wrote this book as his contribution to honor this memorable occasion. In writing it, our friend has revealed a small piece of the lower zones to which the guilty conscience goes after physical death. He wishes to stress the importance of physical existence as being a true blessing of divine mercy, an opportunity for us to adapt ourselves to the mechanisms of infallible justice. For this reason, he weaves the threads of his observations with a narrative of the relationships between the spheres of incarnate spirits and the circles of purgation, wherein dwell human beings unchained from the flesh who have become accomplices in moral delinquency. The excesses of their own conduct have created an outward hell, which is nothing more than a reflection of our inner degrading
selves.
Oh, okay.
Inner selves, when through negligence and cruelty we give in to practicing degrading actions
that force us to endure temporary segregation in the deplorable consequences of our wrongs. Von List, the eminent criminologist of modern times, has observed that the state, in its position as a superior authority, except, of course, for criminal groups that sometimes temporarily drag it down in dreadful abuses of power, does not set punishment aside, thus sustaining judicial order. The state's need to preserve itself justifies punishment. Consequently, almost all the old controversies surrounding theories of criminal law have ceased, since even in the climates of different political regimes, the tendency to punish is innate in the ordinary individual due to the necessity of maintaining order in the collective realm as much as possible. Andre Luiz, however, enables us to perceive that Spiritism reveals a much broader concept of justice. The individual is not simply subordinate to the criterion adopted by the world's magistrates, who may be seen as skilled surgeons in the treatment of expiation of social gangrene, both on and off the earth. The more enlightened the individual, the more responsible he or she becomes through the shackles of his or her own conscience for falling into the thorn bushes of guilt. This book was thus written to emphasize the fact that the principles codified by Allan Kardec have opened up a new era for the human mind, compelling it to examine and readjust it to the pathways traced out by Jesus for the true progress of the soul. For this reason, the book also explains that Spiritism disciplines our freedom so that we not only enjoy a worthwhile social life on the earth, but so
that our spirit may live harmoniously, duly adjusted to the dictates of the perfect universal life,
in accordance with the norms of eternal justice instituted by the supreme balance of God's laws. That is why, in introducing these pages to our dear readers, we recognize in the concepts we embrace not only a sanctuary of sublime consolation, but also a temple of well-defined responsibilities. Reincarnation should be considered a sacred step for the recapitalization of our experiences, and the Spiritist doctrine reviving the gospel of the Lord is a bright light on the evolutionary journey, helping us regenerate our destiny for the construction of our true happiness. In short, the author shows us that our current possibilities are linked to the darkness of our past, demanding tireless work for the good for the construction of tomorrow upon the redemptive foundation of Christ. So, praising the invaluable merits of Allan Kardec's works, we warmly salute their blessed 100 years. Emmanuel.
Thanks, Zoraida. Okay, so we have just I highlight some comments here on what Emmanuel tells us about the book, right? The book focuses a lot on what happens in the lower zones, right? The different aspects of the lower zones we're going to study. And here, it's very important what Emmanuel says. The lower zones where the guilty conscience goes after physical death. So we find ourselves in the lower zones when we have a guilty conscience. Lower zones is formed by our own vibrations of a group of spirits that are guilty, that are feeling guilty for one reason or another. So we create, as Emmanuel says here, an outward hell, which is nothing more than a reflection of our inner selves that we create through negligence and cruelty. Again, it's not actively doing evil, but negligence is ignoring what's happening around us and not making any effort to evolve. So we then, if we proceed in that way, we endure temporary segregation as a consequence of our wrongs, law of cause and effect. So Emmanuel tells us that Andre Luiz in this book talks about justice in the ample sense, because as he explains here, we have our justice here on earth, human justice, that changes according to our evolution. So the punishment 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago are different than the punishment today. Is it better? We have to think that as we are evolving, the punishment is more focused on the rehabilitation of the individual than the punishment as only punishment per se. Are we doing that? Not necessarily. A lot of the earthly political regimes still punish only for the sake of punishment, segregate individuals without giving them opportunities to rehabilitate. But, you know, if we compare what the punishment was 200 years ago, when the death penalty was widespread, to today, where you have the death penalty in a reduced number of countries, unfortunately in this country also, we see that we are evolving. Prisons are mostly still places that do not help individuals to recover, but there are some experiments with prisons that are allowing individuals to have an opportunity to learn and grow. But Spiritism focuses on the concept of justice as us being eternal spirits. So it's a more broader, much broader concept of justice. And then he talks about the book where Andre Luiz helps us understand that Spiritism helps us discipline our freedom, so we can have a healthy life on earth, because we have our free will, but the importance of disciplining our free will for our better understanding of life and a better use of our time. So again, that's basically what this book is going to talk about. Elmo, you have anything to add on the introduction here?
No, João, I don't think so. I think you covered everything.
Okay. So this was, again, 1957, was 100 years after the publication of the first edition of the Spirit's book, which came on April 18, 1857, originally with 519 questions, or 500, and I don't remember how many questions. And then the third edition is what is the edition which we use today, which is 1,019 questions. Okay. When he talks about the codification, we must remind ourselves the codification is comprised of 5 books: the Spirit's book, the Medium's book, the Gospel according to Spiritism, Heaven and Hell, and Genesis. Okay. Any questions here, comments?
Pedro, I just have one comment that I think is useful for us. The man also is right in the second paragraph, a small piece of the lower zones. I think it's very important. We are all guilt consciences. If you're incarnated in this planet, you are. Hopefully, you are recognized as a responsibility for some things of the past. But this is that Andre Luiz presents to us. This is a small piece, as if a small, tiny neighborhood in the lower zones. Don't imagine that the whole lower zone as what it's being displayed in this particular place where Drusus leads and where Drusus is surrounded that we're going to see now.
Okay, yes. Again, when we describe, let's say some person describes the city of New York, it's describing a small portion of Earth. There are many similarities, but there are many differences. It's the same thing in the spiritual world, right? You have similarities and differences between the different realms of the spiritual plane. Thanks, Al. Okay, so let's start, Zoraida.
Yes. Chapter 1, A Light in the Darkness. No, Instructor Druso told us wisely, the study of the spiritual situation of the human individual after the death of the body cannot be relegated to a secondary position. All the civilizations that preceded the Western glory of modern times dedicated special attention to the problems of what happens beyond the grave. Egypt maintained ongoing communications with discarnates and taught that the dead underwent a severe evaluation by Anubis, the jackal-headed god, and Horus, the hawk-headed god, along with Mat, and the goddess of justice, to describe whether their souls should ascend to the splendor of the sun or return to the mazes of earthly trial in deformed and vile bodies. The Hindus believe that, depending on the decision of the judge of the dead, discarnates would either ascend to paradise or descend into the precipice of the kingdom of Varuda, god of the waters, to be isolated in the torture chambers, bound to one another by infernal serpents. The Hebrews, Greeks, Gauls, and Romans held to more or less similar beliefs, convinced that the heavenly heights were reserved for spirits who were upright and
good, pure, and noble, whereas those who had debased themselves in weakness and crime
awaited the torment of hell in the regions of dread, either on this world or somewhere else, through reincarnation in bodies misshapen by expiation and suffering. The conversation fascinated us. Hilario and I were visiting Manso Paz, a
Mansion of Peace.
Mansion of Peace, a noteworthy institution of readjustment headed by the kind and selfless Druso. Situated in the lower zones, the institute was similar to a St. Bernard's monastery in that it was located in a region punished by a hostile natural environment. The difference was that the almost constant snowfall around the famous monastery on the slopes between Switzerland and Italy was replaced around the institute by thick darkness, which at the moment had become even heavier and more dreadful, as if whipped by an incessant gale. Under the jurisdiction of Nossola, the welcoming shelter was founded more than 3 centuries ago and is dedicated to receiving unfortunate or infirm spirits who have decided to work on regenerating themselves. After some time, these individuals may either be admitted to more advanced colonies in the higher rims or return to the human spheres for rectifying reincarnation. With that purpose in mind, the vast building, resembling a huge centaur, equipped with every means of security and defense, maintains departments of assistance and education, where after earthly death, doctors, priests, nurses, and teachers find learning experiences and activities of the highest importance.
Our plan was to make a few observations concerning the laws of cause and effect,
the karma of Hindus, and so after having been duly recommended by the Ministry of Assistance, we found ourselves here enraptured by the explanation of the director, who after a lengthy pause proceeded attentively. It is important to remember that the earth is seen from a wide variety of perspectives. To the astronomer, it is a planet orbiting the sun. To the warrior, it is a battlefield whose geography is changed by the tip of the bayonet. To the sociologist, it is a large stronghold where different races coexist. But to us, it is a valuable arena of spiritual work, something like a filter in which the soul purifies itself little by little over the course of the millennium, developing divine qualities for the ascension to heavenly glories. Thus, it is vital to keep the light of love and knowledge burning amid the darkness, just as it is necessary to keep medicine focused on the disease.
Thanks, Raida. Okay. So we find Andre Luiz once again with Hilario, that we have seen in previous books, in this institution called Mansão Paz, which is Mansion of Peace, a spiritual institution that he describes that it's in the lower zones. It's kind of, he compares it to the St. Bernard's monastery, which if you look, you research it, it's a monastery found in the Alps in between Switzerland and Italy. And it's a very beautiful place, but in a very hostile environment. And so he compares it, Mansion of Peace, to this monastery, because in the sense that a monastery is surrounded by dreadful weather, this Mansion of Peace is surrounded by thick darkness, and we'll see more about it later in this chapter. It's important that Druso starts his speech by saying that the study of the spiritual situation of the human individual after death, the death of the body, cannot be relegated to a secondary position. It's something that we need to focus on. And then he brings some historical facts that this is something that has been done forever since humankind has begun to be more aware of itself. So it goes. We know that Egypt had the communication with the dead, and you had all these the things that we find in the ancient hieroglyphs and the pyramids. A lot of the relationships between the Egyptians and the afterlife. And of course, the Hindus, which were the first ones through the ancient instructions to have communication with the dead through the Vedas and those that followed. And of course, the Hebrews, the Greeks, the Gauls, the Romans, the communication with the dead and the focus on what happens after we die has been with us forever. But Spiritism brings a much more detailed explanation and help us understand better what happens to us after we go back to the spiritual world. So talking a little bit about mention of peace, Andre Luiz tells us that it works under the direction of Nosso Solar. So it's part of the group of institutions directly supervised by Nosso Solar and the spiritual colony that we met when Andre Luiz first started his journey. And Druso says that it's focused on receiving unfortunate or infirm spirits who have decided to work on regenerating themselves. That's very important. It's not spirits that are lost and but have no intention to repair or blaming others. Are spirits that are sick, yes, are guilty, yes, but decided to work on themselves. So after spending some time there, these individuals may be sent to more advanced colonies, Nosso Solar and the likes of it, in the higher realms, or they can go from there to a new reincarnation to continue their learning. So who we find there? Druso says that we find doctors, priests, nurses, and teachers that find experiences and activities of the highest importance. It's interesting that he focused on doctors, priests, nurses, and teachers. All those that are focused on taking care of other human incarnated souls as their main objective. And then he finishes talking about Earth being a valuable arena of spiritual work, where soul reincarnates to purify itself little by little over the course of the millennia, meaning several reincarnations that we go one after another. That's how we evolve, grow, and evolve. Okay, Elmo, anything to add here?
No, not yet.
Okay. Any questions, comments here? Okay, so let's continue.
As we talked, we gazed outside through the transparent material of a broad window at the turmoil of nature. A raging windstorm carrying a dark substance similar to airborne dirt whirled violently in a strange vortex like a dark water spout. From the monstrous body of the dreadful storm, human faces emerged, twisted in horror, cursing and mourning. They appeared suddenly, linked to each other like enormous chains of creatures holding to each other in a moment of peril and their instinctive anxiety to prevail and survive.
Like us, Druso contemplated this sad picture with visible compassion written on his face.
He looked at us silently as if inviting us to reflect. He seemed to be implying how sorrowful the work was for him in that place of suffering. When Hilario asked, "Why not open the doors to those who are crying for help out there? Isn't this supposed to be a rescue outpost?" "Yes," answered the instructor, very moved. "But rescue is only truly meaningful for those who actually want to be rescued." And after a short pause, he continued, "Here on this side of the grave, the most painful surprise for me was exactly this: meeting human beasts, that used to live in the flesh as ordinary people. If giving shelter here without being duly prepared, they would immediately attack us and destroy this institute of peaceful assistance. We mustn't forget that order is the basis of charity. Despite this serene and firm explanation, Drew so concentrated on the scene outside, compassion still showing on his face. The instructor recomposed his facial expression and added, "We are being hit by a large magnetic storm today, and many wanderers in the lower zones are being blown about by the hurricane like dead leaves in a gale." "Are they even aware of it?" Hilario inquired, perplexed.
Very few are. Souls who wander like that after the grave are ones who have no worthy principle in which to take moral shelter.
On the inside, they are as agitated and dark as the storm itself because of the out-control and cruel thoughts they nourish. They hate and destroy. They bite and wound. Giving them shelter straight away in these sanctuaries of assistance would be like giving shelter to bewildered tigers among the faithful praying in a temple. "But do they stay so terribly maladjusted forever?" insisted my distressed friend. The director tried to smile and answered, "Of course not. Such a phase of unconsciousness and madness passes like a storm, although the crisis sometimes lasts for many years. Beaten by the tempest of trials and imposed pain from the outside inward, the soul transforms and composes itself little by little so that it can finally accept responsibility for what it has created for itself." "So that means," I said in turn, "that after death, pilgrimage of the spirit's purgation in the realms of darkness and suffering is not enough to pay all the debts of the conscience." "Exactly," Druso clarified, interrupting my resistant question. "Despair is like a state of dementia into which souls fling themselves in explosions of intemperance and rebelliousness that doesn't count as payment in the divine courts. It wouldn't be right if the defaulter could use screams and profanities to settle the debts it contracted with its own free will. Moreover, from the mental disobedience in which we have carelessly indulged, we always
emerge even unhappier and more in debt than before. When the fever of insanity
is over, the guilty spirit turns to remorse and penitence. It calms down, like the earth returning to serenity and patience after being hit by an earthquake, despite having been mangled and wounded. Then, like soil that has become productive again, the spirit submits once more to the renewing sowing of its destiny. A cloud of tormented expectation had come over us when Hilario considered, if incarnate souls could die in the body only a few days every year, not like the physical sleep during which they recover, but with full awareness of the life that awaits them. Yes, Druso added, that would certainly change the moral face of the world. In any event, human existence, no matter how long it may be, is simply a learning experience in which the spirit acts for beneficial restrictions to put it back on the right path. Using a new physiological machine among its fellow humans, it must see its own renewal, and this requires focusing its mental powers on the earthly experience that temporarily shapes it.
Thanks. Okay, so Andre Luiz describes what's happening there, the windstorm, and these human faces emerging, twisted in horror, cursing and moaning. I was reading this. For those that remember the movie What Dreams May Come, right? There is a scene that the main character goes to the lower zones, and there is a group of spirits that look like they are in a swamp, connected to each other. We see basically only their faces or their heads, and they are also in despair, and that's what it sounds like. So of course, we have to remember Hilario and Andre Luiz are there to ask the questions that we would ask if we were there, right? So the question that Hilario asked, why do one, this is a rescue outpost, why don't we open the door for the spirits who are crying for help, right? And Druso answers, rescue is only truly meaningful for those who actually want to be rescued. That's a lesson we keep seeing over and over again in Spiritism. We learn in different books, in different passages, the importance of us sincerely want to be helped, to receive the assistance. We talk about incarnates, right? Those addicted, those, the alcoholics, they need to want to change. If they don't want to change, there is very little we can do. Again, help is always available. You see this institute there in the middle of this very dark place with the opportunity of spirits that want to be rescued, that sincerely want to receive assistance, the opportunity of being assisted. Andre Luiz, if you go back to the book Nosso Solar and you read the first 2 chapters, you see that Andre Luiz went through this in the lower zones where he was, surrounded by these spirits screaming at him, surrounded by all these so-called physical necessities. He was hungry, he was thirsty, his clothes were all damaged and worn, and he thought about his life in this physical world, but only when he immersed himself in true prayer, asking for help and assistance sincerely, was that Clarencio appeared in front of him and provided the assistance. And then Andre Luiz later asks his mother, where were you? And she answers him, I was always there, but you were not ready to see me or to be assisted. And Druso continues that the most painful surprise that he found on the other side of the grave, or after he discarnated, was to meet what he called human beasts that used to live in the flesh as ordinary peoples. We are surrounded by spirits that when they go back to the spiritual world, they will become human beasts, in the sense that they will revolt against everything that is happening to them. And Druso makes a very important point here. If they open the doors and give opportunity for these beings that are not prepared, what happens is that they would immediately attack and destroy the institute. Order is the basis of charity. That's very important, right? We need to remember that for us to help, we need organization. We need efficiency. We need spirits that know how to take care of things. We need discipline. And that's what Druso is reminding Andre Luiz here. And is also very important for us as a lesson here, right? We can only help those that want to be helped. And for those that want to be helped, we need organized institutions. So if the institutions that we create here on the physical world are not well organized, the help will be inefficient. Of course, in the spiritual world, the things are, because they work in a different way that we do here, in a much more efficient and organized way in these places, they can control these spirits that can come in or cannot. And Druso talks about the scene outside. This is the magnetic storm, that these spirits are blown away, these wanderers of the lower zones. And Hilario asks, are they aware of it? And Druso says very few are. They are, on the inside, they are as agitated and dark as the storm itself. What they have inside, they have hate, they have desire to destroy, they want to attack others, they want to blame everyone else but them for what's happening to them. And so they are, he makes a very interesting comparison, right? You have a shelter, a temple with faithful prayers, and you open it for bewildered tigers, and what that will cause a big destruction there. But this is temporary, of course. Hilario asks if this is eternal. It's not. Nothing is eternal. Such a phase of unconsciousness and madness passes. Eventually, they get tired of it. In different ways, they get tired of it. Andre Luiz got tired, and at a certain point, he started questioning: Is there a God? If there is a God, how can God help me? Why am I not being helped? And he, on his reflections, he eventually found the right path to open himself to assistance. So, as Druso says here, beaten by the tempest of trials that impose pain from the outside inward, right? So the outside world causes pain and suffering. The soul will transform little by little and finally accept responsibility for what it has created for itself. It's our own responsibility. And Andre Luiz then asks, so the suffering of the spirits in these realms of darkness and suffering is not enough to pay the debts? And Druso says, no. It wouldn't be right if the sufferer could use screams and profanities to settle the debts. It contracts with its own free will. You have to work to repair. We need to actively work in repair. He says here, when this is over, the guilty spirit turns to remorse and penitence. Right, when the spirit finally turns to remorse and penitence, calms down. Then, like soil that has become productive again, the spirit submits once more to the renewing soil of its destiny. When you reach the level of remorse and penitence, the spirit is ready to be helped and assisted in rebuilding its own journey. Of course, the necessity, then it needs external assistance because it cannot do it by itself. And then Hilario talks a little bit, it would be interesting if we could die only a few days every year to experience this spiritual world, things that they are seeing there, that we would change the face of the world, the moral face of the world. But of course, God's law, the natural law, is perfect. So it doesn't exist for the right reasons. So we can use the physical life to slowly evolve for our renewal. And this requires our mental powers. Okay?
Yeah, I think that sentence, if you go back there, and I don't have the whole thing, rescue is truly meaningful only for those who actually wants it. I think that sentence is extremely, extremely important, yeah. But rescue is only truly meaningful for those who actually want to be rescued. I think it's a very, very strong statement and very powerful and truthful, of course. But I think you have to pay good attention to the word want. Because very often, especially individuals in that state over there, and us over here very often as well, we want to better ourselves. We want to get out of whatever situation we find ourselves, but we don't really know what is the way out. What is it that will rescue us? We want something better than whatever we find ourselves, but we completely lost without direction. And I think that's the reason that Mother Teresa says that prayer is a means of educating our desires, the wants, the will, because everything starts with our will, right? When we will motivates us to create thoughts, and thoughts create actions and words, right? And we see that in our meetings from time to time that individuals do want something better, but they have no guidance of what's better. Is if like better to be the leader of that group that is hurting them that lower zones, which in other words, and you're gonna see very soon, is the opposite of the want. And some of the individuals, they want to get out, they want to be helped, but they don't know how. They have no idea of how to get there. So sometimes individuals will be rescued, and we imagine, oh, you asked for it. And indeed, you asked for it, but in a very indirect way, not really knowing that that's exactly what's good for them. Some will accept, and some will reject, of course. They have their free will. But we see that quite often in our mediumship meeting, that spirits have taken to receive help, and they don't know that that is the help that they actually want. So I think this word want has to be taken with care, because that they want may be not fully conscious of that's exactly what they want. They want something better. Andre Luiz was rescued after a prayer to be helped. Prayer, educate the desire, educate the will, but did really know that the help that he wanted to be taken to Nosolar? He had no idea what Nosolar was at that time. And another thing that is important is for the question from Andre Luiz. So after going through all that suffering in the lower zones, and then go through all the situations that are witnessed outside of that place where they were seeing all those faces, Andre Luiz asked this, isn't that enough for them to pay for all the sins? And of course not. That's something that we see in our spiritist meeting, also individuals who's coming with lamentation, complaining that they're suffering so much, they are so sorry for what they do, but they don't have the energy to stand up and start making corrections. And we say after, oh, shut up with your lamentations. No, of course, you don't say in these words, but that's not going to get you anywhere. What's going to get you out of this situation is work, is reparation, is start to believing in your potentials as someone able to repair the mistakes of the past and move on. To stay in the state of lamentation and feel sorry for yourself is not going to do anything. So for us, very often, the opportunity of reincarnation to be able to make those reparations, to make those corrections, is what really serves as stepstones for our ascendancy to a better world that we all want.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
Okay.
Okay, let's go.
Okay. The instructor's fluid, wise words truly enchanted us, and because I felt that I ought to make the most of the time, I silently pondered the condition of the discarnate souls suffering the strain of the storm outside. Druso preceded my mental inquiry and smiled as if waiting for me to ask a clear and positive question. Commanded by the power of his gaze, I commented respectfully.
In light of that beautiful spectacle outside, we must, of course, wonder about where those experienced the immersion in this
whirlwind of horror came from. Are they ordinary moral delinquents, or are they criminals accused of major wrongdoings? Might some of them be young souls from our indigenous peoples, for instance? Our friend's answer came quickly. I too had similar questions when I came here. I have been living in this place of assistance, prayer, and hope for 50 years now. I crossed its threshold as a critical patient after discarnation, and I found it to be both a hospital and a school. With proper support, I began to study my new situation and was eager to serve. I pushed gurneys, helped with the cleaning, became a nurse, a teacher, and a magnetizer, until some years later, I was delighted to accept the job of guiding the institution under the positive command of the instructors who supervise us. My duties demanded patient, laborious research, and I can safely say that only those consciences that committed deliberate crimes, thereby turning off the light of their inner equilibrium, commingled in the dense darkness out there. Having committed only the natural errors of their first experiences on the earth, young souls do not pass through these lower zones in any kind of purgatory affliction. Because of magnetic attraction, every spirit is yoked to its proper circle of evolution. Until they develop their mental world, most primitives almost always live confined to the jungle that comprises their interests and dreams, and are only gradually taken from their trivial grounds under the direction of the benevolent and wise spirits who watch over them. As for the souls who are notoriously primitive, the majority develop under the
guidance of kind spirits who support and inspire them by means of sacrificial work at the bottom of the social institution.
utilizing moral errors, offspring of good intentions, as invaluable instruction that ensures their education. Thus, I can assure you that the hellish regions per se are inhabited only by those minds that were aware of their moral responsibilities, but deliberately ignored them with the foolish purpose of trying to deceive God. Strictly speaking, hell can thus be defined as a vast arena of imbalance, established by calculated evil, born of willful blindness and downright wickedness. There are some spirits who have lived there for centuries, who have become veritable beasts, crystallized in cruelty and selfishness. Such sad places are a vast vibratory province connected with earthly humankind, because all infernal suffering is nothing but a creation of humankind itself. They function as strangers of spirits that slid into all sorts of derogations, scorning the responsibilities the Lord gave them. Consequently, every soul that has been endowed with the knowledge of truth and justice is responsible for upholding the good. For if it is slipped into this or that crime while on earth, heedless of the ennobling duty that the world offered it, it will spend days, months, or years in such places after the death of the physical body, so that it can reconsider its attitude before reincarnating for the readjustment required of it. So, Hilario was about to draw a conclusion, but Druso anticipated his thought and summarized. So, the infernal spirits who think they rule over this region with infallible power have lived here for an undetermined amount of
time, and the wicked creatures that are attuned to them, although suffering their domination,
let themselves be imprisoned here for years on end. The souls who fell into moral delinquence and vice, but who show potential for quicker recuperation, remain here fairly briefly or come at regular intervals, learning that the price of passion is much too high. Although they are not completely free of the dark complexities that cast them into darkness in the first place, discarnates of this type, who begin experiencing repentance and remorse, laceration and pain, find that such places of fraternity and assistance Work actively and diligently to make them feel as welcome as possible, habilitating them for the return to the expiatory experience of the flesh. I was recalling the time when, disoriented and semi-conscious, I myself had searched the pathways of the darkness after my disengagement from the physical body and was confronting my own mental states of the past and present when Druso continued. This, it is easy to understand that if darkness is the frame that emphasizes the light, then as a region of suffering and disharmony, hell is perfectly conceivable, representing a just process for the fertiling of the spirit on its way to the higher life. All hellish places appear, exist, and disappear with the approval of the Lord, who tolerates such human creations, like a father who allows his children to get hurt and uses the experiences to help them appreciate health. Consequently, minds dedicated to rebelliousness and criminality may believe they are working only for themselves, but they are actually working for the Lord, who corrects evil with evil itself. That is why everything in life is a step toward the victory of the supreme good.
Druso was going to continue, but an unseen bell rang. Seeming to be aware of time constraints, he stood up and told us simply,
My friends, the time has come for us to talk with some of the patients who have shown themselves to be peaceful and lucid. We devote a few hours twice a week to this activity. We stood up without any further comment and followed him.
Thanks, Zoraida.
Okay.
So he continues talking here about the condition of these discarnate souls that are suffering outside. And Andre Luiz asks, what type of spirits are there, right? Are major criminals, ordinary spirits with delinquencies, or young souls that are starting their journey? And Druso answers that first starting by saying that he had the similar questions when he arrived there. And again, we all would have the same questions, right? And he tells us that he's been living there for 50 years, right? So again, lifetime in the spiritual world in colonies surrounding Earth are very similar to time that we experience here on Earth, our physical world time. But of course, the understanding and experience of time of each spirit is different, right? As we are here, right? When we are doing something that pleases us, time flies. When we are doing something that we dread, time takes forever to pass, and it's the same time. So 50 years Druso is there, which for a spirit in the spiritual world is the average time between reincarnations, as we learn here, but not necessarily. But the important thing here is how he describes what he did there, right? First, this place is found to be a hospital and a school for those that participate in our mediumship meetings. We always tells the spirits, most of the time tell the spirits, when they ask, what place is this? This is a house of assistance, can be a hospital, can be a school, can be places that will help spirits grow. So it is this type of colony. Mansion of Peace is this type of colony that we use so frequently in our mediumship meetings. He started there by pushing gurneys, then he helped cleaning, he became a nurse, then from there he became a teacher, a magnetizer, and then finally he took the job of taking care of the institution. Eventually he'll move on to other places, probably a new reincarnation, but he can be someone will replace him, because it's how it works also in the spiritual world. But he continues explaining to Andre Luiz and to us that the spirits that are surrounding there, it's not young souls, because the natural errors of our first experience on earth do not mean experiencing these lower zones in this affliction. So again, we learn by making mistakes and learning from our mistakes, and that's how we evolve. If we make mistakes of things we didn't know, we don't create karmas. When we are repeating their mistakes is when we start creating karma for ourselves. We know what to do and we still do not do it right. So he talks to us about those primitive beings that live confined to the places where they lived, and this is something that we learn also from Andre Luiz in other books. In Evolution in Two Worlds, he talks about this, that when a spirit that is a primitive spirit discarnates, it goes to the spiritual world, but it stays there where they are, because that's the only reality they know. So they are afraid of going anywhere else. So they stay there and they reincarnate there in the places surrounding them, the place they are used to. So but of course they are under the direction of wise, benevolent spirits that take care of them. So he says the hellish regions are inhabited by minds that were aware of their moral responsibilities, but ignore them with the foolish purpose of trying to deceive God. So when we make mistakes, knowing what we are doing is when we end up in these places that he describes. We commit evil acts for the sake of doing it. So he tells us that hell can be defined as a vast arena of imbalance established by calculated evil, born of willful blindness and downright weakness. Again, it's important for us to understand that the spirits that are in these places are spirits that cause harm to others, knowing what they are doing. They are not spirits that commit some mistakes in life, that feel guilty. These are different. There are different places for those type of spirits. Yes, they spend some time in the lower zones, in the disorganized lower zones, yes, but not in these regions, which are regions for spirits that are have committed evil for the sake of committing evil. And these places are creation of humankind ourselves, right? We live in a planet of trials and atonement, so the vibration of the general vibration of the spirits living on earth creates this kind of hellish places that spirits find themselves when they are back in the spiritual world. So again, every spirit that has been endowed with the knowledge of truth and justice is responsible for upholding the good. The problem is when those spirits that are aware, that have the knowledge of truth and justice, slipped into crime despite of what the world offered. So it will end up spending days, months, or years in such places after the death of the physical body until it reconsiders their attitude and probably be sent to the new reincarnation. And Druso continues, the spirits that think they rule over this region live there for a period of time, and they have spirits connected to them, wicked creatures. They let themselves be imprisoned there for years to end. We saw that in the book Liberation, right? When Gregorio was the leader of one of these lower zones, and he was the lead of many of spirits that attuned to him and connected to him. The spirits that fell in delinquency and vice, but they already show potential for a quicker recuperation, that they can repair their mistakes, that can work actively on repairing, they remain there in Mansion of Peace for briefly, and they come they learn the price of passions is much too high, and they learn from it. They are not yet free of the dark motives that put them in those places, but they work actively and diligently to make them to return to a new reincarnation better prepared. That Andre Luiz remembers his own experience in the lower zones, and Druso talks about the natural laws, God's ruling of every place. And he tells us that these minds that think that they are working for themselves, they are actually working under the natural laws, because the natural laws created by God dictates that evil corrects itself with evil. You know, the discipline that is imposed by evil spirits in the end up being God's justice being enacted. And so the conversation finishes when Druso says that it's time for us to talk with some of the patients there in Mansion of Peace that are prepared, more peaceful and lucid. And he said that twice a week they dedicate a few hours to this activity of talking to these suffering spirits that are already ready to be working on their renewal. And we are going to see that in the next chapter. Okay? So that was it for this chapter. Elmo, a lot of things here, right?
Yeah, but I think the most important is again, go back to what I said in the beginning. That's why I said in the beginning that this is one neighborhood of this vast lower zone. And who ends up being those faces that Hilario and Andre Luiz sees through a window-like structure where they are? These are individuals who have decidedly, using their will, again, you go back to their want, to go against natural laws and committed crimes in accordance with the natural law, of course, aware of what they were doing. And as a comparison, I think that's why Druso goes through the primitive individuals. I would use an expression just as an analogy, young spirits, child spirits that still are what you'd call our indigenous. They do not have that intellectual ability to have those kind of wants yet. Therefore, as I said, they're not going to carry karmas, right? The title of the book is Action and Reaction, okay? They have not committed the actions that would generate such a reaction. And guilt consciences, as Andre Luiz, as Emmanuel put in the introduction, that's why I said that. All of us guilt of something. You know, we are here to repair. We are here to do the reparations and learn from our mistakes and move on. So this is a little bit, I would say, scary, right? Especially for atomic reasons, that idea of hell is still strong within us, even if we know better. You don't get rid of those things very easily. But it's really a state of mind that it's clearly placed over there by Druso. So I think it's very important that we keep in mind that those individuals there, that in that state of so much cruelty, it's all self-imposed. It's all what they generate to themselves, aware of what they were doing. Did they know that the consequence would be that? No, they didn't. But the law is corrective. And again, I go back to the manual, making a parallel with our law over here that is punitive, because the state needs to preserve itself, right? The divine laws is not concerned with self-preservation. The divine law is absolute, period, right? And the objective of all that law is to let us revise our actions, redo things in a way that we produce goodness. So action and reaction to be, if you do good, the action is good, the reaction will be good as well. Not to escape something, not to not be punished, for the sake of doing good. That is a quality of a good spirit. The individual who doesn't do bad because is afraid of hell have done anything for himself. Only the one who does good for the sake of good. And that is the true meaning of reincarnation for us. That's true meaning, covering that recently in the Spirit's book as well, the veil of forgetfulness. And Andre Luiz asked here in this chapter, wouldn't it be nice if we could spend some time on Hilario, sometime in the lower zone, and see the consequences of our actions? But then we'd be acting only out of fear and not out of good. And that's not what the law wants from us. So just want to say that those individuals that Andre Luiz sees in the window over there are individuals who really had made the objective, decisive actions against the natural laws and persist with that state of mind. Therefore, that's the reason they are there. Because at the moment they start to change a little bit its way of thinking, they have a chance of being rescued, even to places like where Druso works right now.
Yeah, I think for us to learn here in terms of thinking about ourselves, right? We look at our own journeys here, and it's very unlikely that we'll find ourselves in these places when we go back to the spiritual world, because first the mistakes, we all make mistakes, but the mistakes we made, we have an understanding of our spiritual nature. We have an understanding of our necessities, our needs, and even if we don't find ourselves in a place where we would like to find ourselves, we will very soon be open for assistance, because we understand the need of assistance in our cases. So it's for us to differentiate the different places in the spiritual world, but understanding also that when we look at ourselves, we cannot fear ending in these places like this because we haven't really done anything harmful with the intention of causing harm to others in a sense of these spirits that we can find there, right? Because that sometimes when you read something like this, you can start analyzing ourselves and running the risk of feeling guilty and feeling afraid of finding ourselves in places like this. And again, these are spirits that are blind to the necessity of evolving, that blame everything and everyone else for their problems and do not recognize their own responsibilities. Okay. Any final comments, questions here? Okay, so next month we go to chapter 2, the instructor's comments. So for next Sunday, which is the second Sunday of the month, we last month finished the gospel according to Spiritism. So Elmo is going to start with us on a very interesting book called Jesus in the Home that many of you have read, but it talks about the passages is by May, the Spirit May through Francisco Xavier. It talks about experiences that are important for us to learn, related, of course, to the gospel according to Spiritism. Okay, so we're going to start next week with, I believe, chapter 1, right, El?
Yeah.
Okay. So our activities are, back to normal. We are open tomorrow. We are going to have our fraternal assistance and our regular activities tomorrow, and our study groups on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. Okay. Carol, can you do our final prayer?
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much, John, and thank you very much, Elmo. And Sarita, thank you for reading for us today. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we give thanks to be together again as brothers and sisters for our studies of the new book, Action and Reaction, the Introduction, and Chapter 1, A Light in the Darkness. After we leave the physical body, we do return to the spiritual world. However, some will find themselves in the lower regions due to their suffering of a guilty conscience. They can choose to repair and regenerate themselves due to their past degrading and negative actions. The purification of a soul must sincerely want to receive the assistance to change. Efficient help is always available, and a soul must take responsibility actively to arrive mentally at the level of remorse and repentance. Time in the spiritual colonies is similar to Earth time and provides healing opportunities and duties to be assigned to souls who have created karmic actions and sincerely recognize their unbalanced and harmful actions. Mistakes can always be repaired with active awareness through the natural laws to move us forward toward goodness. We give thanks to our spiritual benefactors and the good spirits for inspiring and guiding us today. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us for our loved ones, our teachers, our directors, our counselors, our mediums, the workers, and all participants. We pray for inner peace, and especially now for world peace and for those who are suffering in the physical and spiritual worlds. We pray for our center, SGNY, and all Spiritist centers throughout the world that they may grow, prosper, expand, and be protected by day and by night. As we close, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to our family, friends, loved ones, and co-workers in this new year. May we go forth now and remind ourselves to be beacons of love, of light, of peace, of service, and charity, which is love in action. May peace and love prevail. So be it.